David Reeves watched the delegates file into the judgment hall with growing unease. The massive chamber aboard Pinnacle 7 station could hold thousands, and today it seemed every species in the galaxy had sent representatives to witness humanity's trial. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his formal diplomatic jacket. After 5 years of negotiations and countless meetings, everything came down to this single day. The Corvathy delegate settled into its hovering seat, its 6 eyes all fixed on David with obvious contempt. Beside it, the Herschel representative clicked its mandibles, and what David had learned was their species' version of a disapproving sigh. Further back, dozens of other species waited in silence. None of them looked friendly. David had known this would be difficult. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. They were newcomers in a galaxy where some civilizations had been exploring space for millennia. But he had hoped that Earth's contributions to science and trade would count for something. Looking at the cold faces surrounding him, he realized how naive that hope had been. A crystalline figure emerged from a side entrance, moving with fluid grace despite standing nearly 12 feet tall. Oryx, the High Arbiter of the Galactic Council, took position at the elevated platform that dominated the hall. Light refracted through the Arbiter's translucent body, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. This council convenes to determine humanity's petition for membership among civilized species, Oryx announced. The Arbiter's voice resonated directly in David's mind, as it did for all species present. David Reeves of Earth will present his case. The council will render judgment. David walked to the speaking platform on unsteady legs. He had rehearsed his presentation 100 times, but now the words felt hollow in his mouth. Still, he began. He spoke of humanity's rapid technological advancement, their artistic achievements, their growing understanding of the universe. He showed recordings of human cities, schools, hospitals. He presented treaties Earth had signed, promising to respect territorial boundaries and trade regulations. The delegates listened in stony silence. When David finished, he felt like his words had simply vanished into the void. The Corvathy delegate rose immediately. "We appreciate the human's presentation," it said, though its tone suggested otherwise. "However, this council must consider not just promises but actions. We have evidence of human aggression." David's stomach dropped. What evidence? 3 years ago, a Corvathy scientific probe was destroyed near one of your colony worlds. The probe was monitoring stellar phenomena, posing no threat. Yet human vessels attacked and obliterated it. The delegate projected images of debris floating in space, clearly showing Corvathy markings. "That's not," David started, but the Herschel representative interrupted. "Furthermore, human ships have repeatedly violated sanctuary zones established to protect developing species. We have records of unauthorized human presence in 7 restricted systems." More images appeared, showing human vessel signatures in forbidden space. David felt panic rising in his chest. He knew about the probe incident. It had been investigated and cleared as a misunderstanding, but he had no documentation with him, no way to prove it. As for the sanctuary violations, this was the first he had heard of them. "These accusations require investigation," David protested. "I haven't been provided evidence or given time to respond properly." Oryx raised one crystalline hand. "The human raises a fair concern. However, this council has access to something that transcends verbal testimony or documentation that can be falsified." The Arbiter gestured, and a panel in the floor slid open. A pedestal rose, bearing a smooth spherical object that seemed to shift colors constantly. David had heard rumors of such things, but never seen one. "This is a witness stone," Oryx explained, "created by the forerunners who once guided younger species toward civilization. The stone can read psychic imprints left on physical objects, revealing their true history without bias or interpretation. We will use it to examine artifacts from incidents involving humans." David's mouth went dry. He had no idea what artifacts the council possessed or what they might reveal. Humanity's expansion into space had been messy at times, marked by accidents and misunderstandings. If the council cherry-picked incidents without context, they could paint humans as monsters. "We have collected items from various encounters with your species," Oryx continued. The stone will show us the truth of these moments. Based on what we see, this council will decide if humanity deserves a place among us, or if your species poses too great a danger to permit further expansion. The other delegates murmured approval. David saw satisfaction on many faces. They had already decided, he realized. This trial was just theater, a formality before they rejected humanity and probably imposed restrictions on Earth's space travel. I object to this process, David said, trying to keep his voice steady. Examining random artifacts without context is fundamentally unfair. Any species could be condemned if you only look at their worst moments. The stone provides context, Oryx replied calmly. It shows events as they truly occurred. If humanity has nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. David wanted to argue further, but he could see it was pointless. The council had made up its mind about the process. All he could do now was hope that whatever artifacts they examined would not be too damaging. He returned to his seat, feeling defeated before the real judgment had even begun. Around the hall, delegates settled in to watch humanity be condemned by its own history. David closed his eyes and thought of Earth, wondering if he would be remembered as the diplomat who lost humanity's future among the stars. The first artifact arrived in a sealed container carried by 2 council guards. They placed it on a platform beside the witness stone with obvious care. Through the transparent sides, David could see a twisted piece of machinery, blackened by fire and pitted with holes. He did not recognize it. Oryx moved closer to examine the object. This device was recovered from a disputed border region between Corvathy space and human colonial territory. It is identified as a combat drone of human manufacture. The Arbiter's crystalline fingers touched the witness stone, activating it. The stone began to glow with inner light. The air above it shimmered and then solidified into a 3-dimensional projection that filled half the chamber. David watched as the scene took form, showing a dusty planet with small domed settlements scattered across its surface. Mining equipment dotted the landscape. The perspective shifted, and David realized he was seeing through the drone's own sensors. It flew over the mining colony at high speed, weapon systems active. Below, people scattered and ran for shelter. The drone opened fire, its railguns tearing through buildings and equipment. Explosions bloomed across the settlement. The projection showed fleeing colonists, some falling as debris struck them. Gasps and angry mutters filled the chamber. David felt sick watching the destruction, but something about it felt wrong. The scene was real. The witness stone could not lie, but it was incomplete. The projection faded. Oryx turned toward David. The evidence speaks clearly. Human weapons attacking civilian miners. May I ask a question? David said, standing despite his shaking legs. Proceed. How long before this attack did events begin? The stone shows what happened, but not why. The Corvathy delegate made a harsh buzzing sound. The human seeks to justify violence against innocents. There is no justification. I'm not justifying anything, David insisted. I'm asking for complete context. The Forerunners designed the stone to show truth, correct? Then show the whole truth, not just a fragment. Oryx considered this for a long moment. A fair request. The Arbiter touched the stone again, and the projection reformed. This time showing events from hours earlier. The mining colony appeared peaceful in daylight. Then ships descended from orbit, sleek vessels bearing no identification. Armed figures emerged and began systematically executing the miners. They moved through the settlement, killing everyone they found, looting supplies and equipment. The colonists tried to fight back but were overwhelmed. David recognized the attacking ships now. They belonged to pirate clans that operated in the border regions, preying on isolated settlements regardless of which species lived there. The human combat drone appeared in the projection much later, after distress calls had gone out. It engaged the pirate vessels, driving them away from the colony. Some of its weapons fire struck buildings, but only ones already destroyed by the pirates. The fleeing figures were pirates, not miners. The projection faded again. Several delegates looked uncomfortable now. The Hertian representative remained silent. The drone was protecting the colony, David said quietly, not attacking it. The context changes interpretation, Oryx admitted. However, one incident proves little. We have more artifacts to examine. The next item was a section of hull plating, clearly from a human transport ship. Scorched and torn, it bore Earth registry markings. The witness stone revealed its memories. The projection showed the interior of a cargo hauler. Crew members rushed through corridors in obvious panic. Alarms blared. Someone shouted about reactor warnings. The ship's captain ordered all hands to evacuation pods. The view shifted to external sensors, showing the transport fleeing at maximum speed, its engines glowing dangerously bright. Behind it, space itself seemed to tear open with brilliant fury. A stellar flare erupted from a nearby star, sending waves of deadly radiation across the system. The transport fired its maneuvering thrusters frantically, trying to outrun the expanding radiation front, but the projection showed something else too. 3 smaller vessels floated disabled in the flare's path, their crews broadcasting distress calls. The transport captain changed course, moving toward them instead of fleeing to safety. The crew began extending magnetic grapples, pulling the disabled ships close. "They'll never get everyone aboard in time," someone in the projection said. "Then we push them ahead of us," the captain replied. "Use our engines to accelerate their vessels. We'll shield them from the worst of the radiation with our own hull." The transport positioned itself between the disabled ships and the oncoming flare. Its hull plating absorbed tremendous heat and radiation as it pushed the other vessels toward safety. Sections of armor failed and burned away. The crew struggled to maintain engine power long enough to reach safe distance. The projection showed crew members dying at their posts from radiation exposure, but they kept working until the disabled ships cleared the danger zone. The transport itself barely survived. When it finally escaped the flare's reach, it was crippled and venting atmosphere. But the 3 ships it saved limped away intact, their crews alive, because humans had put themselves between death and those who needed help. The chamber fell silent when the projection ended. David saw recognition dawning on several faces. The Herschend delegate looked troubled now. "The stone does not lie," Oryx said slowly. "Yet the interpretation of these fragments has been incomplete. What appears as reckless flight was actually sacrifice." "This is why context matters," David said, finding his voice stronger now. "Judge humanity by all its actions, not selective moments that can be twisted to fit a predetermined conclusion." The Corvithi delegate rose angrily. "2 incidents prove nothing. This human species remains dangerous and unpredictable." "Then examine more artifacts," David challenged. "Show us everything you have. Let the stone reveal the full truth." Oryx nodded slowly. "Very well. We will continue." But at that moment, a junior technician entered the chamber carrying something unexpected. The technician looked nervous as she approached the High Arbiter. She carried a sealed container made of some ancient material that seemed to absorb light. David had never seen anything like it. The young woman bowed respectfully to Oryx before speaking. "High Arbiter, I apologize for the interruption. I work in the archival vault beneath this station. While preparing other artifacts for examination, I found something unusual. This container was cataloged decades ago but never fully processed. The records indicate it holds a human object recovered from forbidden space." Oryx tilted its crystalline head. "Forbidden space? Which system?" "The records designated as Sector 447 Gray. The entire sector was declared off-limits 30 years ago, though the original reasoning is unclear in our files. This object was recovered by a Council scout team and stored pending investigation, but it appears the investigation never occurred." The Corvithi delegate made a dismissive gesture. "Ancient debris has no relevance to current proceedings." "On the contrary," Oryx said. "If humans were active in forbidden space 30 years ago, this is quite relevant. The timing predates official human contact with the Council. It suggests your species was exploring farther than you have admitted." David felt new worry creeping into his chest. He had studied Earth's early expansion carefully. 30 years ago, humanity had barely established its first colonies. If some ship had violated restricted space, It could undermine everything he had said about humanity respecting boundaries. "Open the container," Oryx commanded. The technician unsealed the ancient vessel with careful movements. A smell like old metal filled the chamber. She reached inside and withdrew something small, placing it on the platform beside the witness stone. It was a helmet visor, badly damaged and corroded by time and exposure to vacuum. But the human writing etched into its surface remained legible. David read the words and felt his breath catch in his throat. Alex Ward, Medical Officer, USMS Good Samaritan. He knew that designation. USMS stood for United Space Medical Service, a civilian organization that operated humanitarian vessels in the early expansion period. They had been decommissioned 15 years ago after their functions were absorbed into larger government programs. David had read about them in history files but never paid much attention. "A medical officer?" the Herschend delegate observed. "Not a soldier." "The designation USMS suggests a civilian rescue vessel," another delegate added. Oryx placed crystalline fingers on the witness stone the moment contact was made. The stone flared with brilliant light that made several delegates shield their eyes. David had to look away from the intensity. When he could see again, the projection above the stone was sharper and more vivid than the previous ones had been. "The psychic imprint is remarkably strong," Oryx said with surprise in its mental voice. As if the memories were seared into the material by intense emotion. The projection showed the interior of a small medical ship, cramped and obviously designed for efficiency rather than comfort. A young human with tired eyes moved between beds where injured people lay. Not humans, David realized. The patients were Herschend, their insectoid features unmistakable. The perspective shifted, showing events from hours earlier. The Good Samaritan received a distress call. A Herschend colony transport had suffered catastrophic engine failure in deep space. The ship was breaking apart. Over 300 colonists aboard, many of them children. Their rescue vessels were days away. They had only hours to live. David watched as the human medical ship responded immediately. Captain of the Good Samaritan made the decision without hesitation, though the ship was designed to carry only 50 people comfortably. The crew began evacuation operations, pulling Herschend colonists from the dying transport. Alex Ward appeared in the projection, working frantically in the medical bay. The young officer treated injured colonists as they were brought aboard, moving from patient to patient without pause. Herschend children cried in fear and pain. Alex spoke soothingly to them despite not sharing their language. Using gentle touches and calm presence to comfort them, the ship's engineer appeared at the medical bay door. "Alex, we're over capacity by 5 times. Life support is failing. If we take more people, we might not keep anyone alive." Alex looked at the engineer with exhausted but determined eyes. "Then we fix the life support. We're not leaving people to die in space." "There's something else," the engineer said grimly. Sensors picked up multiple contacts approaching fast. Profile matches Ravager hunter packs. The projection shifted to show external space. David recognized the Ravager ships immediately, though he had only seen them in historical documents. 30 years ago, they had been a plague on the galaxy, predatory species that attacked any vulnerable target for resources and slaves. The Council had eventually united to drive them away, but it had taken years of warfare. The human captain gathered the crew. "We can't outrun them, not with this much mass aboard. The Herschend transport is completely disabled. If we run, the Ravagers will slaughter everyone on it." "What do you suggest?" someone asked. "We position ourselves between the Ravagers and the transport. We buy time for the Herschend colonists to evacuate in emergency pods. Their rescue ships will pick them up once they scatter." "That's suicide," Alex said quietly. "Yes," the captain agreed. "But it's also the right thing to do. Anyone who wants to leave can take a pod now. I won't order anyone to stay." Nobody left. David watched through tears as the 17-person crew of the Good Samaritan prepared to die defending strangers they had never met. They positioned their small medical ship between the Ravagers and the crippled Herschend transport, knowing they could not win the fight but hoping they could delay long enough. The Ravagers opened fire. The projection showed the Ravager weapons tearing into the Good Samaritan's hull. The small medical ship had minimal armor and no real defensive systems. It was designed to save lives, not fight battles. But it returned fire with the few weapons it possessed, targeting the Ravager-led ship's engines. Inside, alarm screamed. The crew worked with desperate speed to launch the Herschend colonists in emergency pods. Alex Ward moved through the medical bay, helping injured colonists into the pods even as explosions rocked the ship. A Herschend child clung to Alex's leg, terrified. The medical officer gently but firmly placed the child into a pod with its parent. "You're going to be okay," Alex said. "Help is coming." Another impact struck the ship. The hull breached in the medical bay section. Atmosphere began venting into space. Emergency barriers tried to seal the breach but failed. Alex was thrown against a wall by the decompression, striking hard enough that blood immediately began flowing from a head wound. David watched in horror as Alex struggled to stand despite obvious injury. More colonists waited in the medical bay, unable to reach the pods on their own. The medical officer began dragging them across the floor one by one, fighting against the pull of escaping air and the pain of injuries that would have dropped most people. 3 Herschend children huddled in a corner, frozen with fear. Alex crawled toward them as debris fell from the damaged ceiling. A piece of twisted metal struck Alex's side, and the medical officer cried out in pain but kept moving. Blood stained the deck plating. Alex reached the children and pulled them into an emergency pod. Activating its launch sequence, the projection showed the pod ejecting from the dying ship, carrying the children to safety. 16 pods had launched now, scattering into space where the Ravagers would not waste time chasing them. The crippled Herschend transport had released its own pods as well. Nearly all 300 colonists would survive, but the Good Samaritan was coming apart. Another Ravager strike penetrated to the engine room. The human engineer died instantly. Fire spread through the corridors. The captain broadcast a final message on all emergency channels, giving their position and the location of the escape pods. Begging anyone listening to rescue the Herschend colonists, Alex Ward lay on the medical bay floor now, too injured to move. The medical officer's breathing came in ragged gasps. The helmet with its visor lay nearby, knocked loose during the decompression. Through the cracked viewport, stars were visible. Alex stared at them as the ship's power failed and darkness closed in, the last thing recorded in the visors. Memory was a simple thought, clear and strong despite the pain and approaching death. They're safe. The children are safe. The witness stone's projection faded slowly, as if reluctant to release the powerful memories it had shown. The judgment chamber remained absolutely silent. David looked around and saw that he was not the only one crying. The Herschend delegate wept openly, its mandibles trembling. Several other species showed their own versions of grief and shock. The technician who had brought the visor spoke quietly, her voice breaking. The records show that Herschend rescue vessels arrived 6 hours later and recovered all the escape pods. 287 colonists survived. The 17 humans aboard the Good Samaritan all perished. The incident occurred in what was then considered uncharted space during a period of administrative chaos in the Council. The human sacrifice was noted in field reports but never forwarded to central authority. 3 decades, the Herschend delegate said, its voice thick with emotion. For 30 years, my people have known we were saved by humans who died protecting us. But our government never reported it to the Council. The bureaucrats claimed it would complicate our trade negotiations if we appeared indebted to an unknown species. The Corvathy delegate stood abruptly. David expected another accusation, but instead the alien's voice carried shame. I must make a confession before this council. The probe that humanity allegedly destroyed 3 years ago was not attacked by humans. It was damaged during a Ravager incursion in that sector. My predecessor falsified the report to conceal our security failures and blamed a convenient target. I discovered this deception only recently, but lacked the courage to admit it publicly until now. Murmurs of shock rippled through the chamber. Oryx turned its crystalline gaze on the Corvathy delegate. You brought false charges before this council? Yes, High Arbiter, I am deeply ashamed. Watching the sacrifice of the Good Samaritan's crew makes me realize I cannot let political convenience continue to slander those who would die to protect strangers. The Hertian delegates stood as well. I too must confess. The Sanctuary Zone violations attributed to humanity were mischaracterized. Human vessels entered restricted space, yes, but in every case they were responding to distress calls from ships in danger. Our records show this clearly, but we chose to interpret their actions as violations rather than rescues. David sat in stunned silence as the truth emerged. The charges that had seemed so damning were based on lies and deliberate misinterpretation. But more than that, something larger was becoming clear. The pattern shown by the witness stone was undeniable. Oryx raised one crystalline hand, calling for silence. This council will examine the previous artifacts again, with full context. The Arbiter's mental voice carried absolute authority. The witness stone will show us the complete truth of each incident. The combat drone was placed before the stone again. This time, Oryx used deeper access to the psychic imprints. The projection showed not just the drone's attack on the pirates, but the hours of searching for survivors afterward. The human soldiers rendering medical aid to wounded miners regardless of species, and the drone pilot's relief when all the colonists were found alive. The hull plating from the transport ship revealed similar details. The ship had not just pushed disabled vessels away from the stellar flare, but had stayed with them afterward, using its own dwindling power to broadcast their location until rescue arrived. 2 crew members had died from radiation exposure they received while repairing damaged life support systems on the rescued ships. Oryx examined 3 more artifacts over the next hour. Each one told the same story. A human cargo ship that had bankrupted its company by dumping valuable cargo to make room for refugees fleeing a civil war. A human survey team that lost half its members defending a research station from criminals, though the researchers were from a species humanity had never even encountered before. A human pilot who crashed her fighter into an asteroid to change its trajectory away from a populated moon, dying to save people who would never know her name. Every incident the Council had collected showed humans putting themselves in danger to protect others. Not just other humans, but any species that needed help. The pattern was so consistent it could not be coincidence or propaganda. This was simply what humans did. David watched delegates process this information. Some looked amazed. Others appeared troubled, perhaps realizing how close they had come to condemning an innocent species. A few still seemed skeptical, as if waiting for evidence that would confirm their original prejudices. The Corvathy delegate approached David during a brief recess. The alien's 6 eyes all focused on him with an intensity that had once seemed hostile, but now appeared almost pleading. "I need you to understand something," the delegate said. "When my predecessor blamed humans for the probe incident, it was not random malice. We were terrified. The Ravagers had returned to our space after years of absence. Our defenses failed catastrophically. Rather than admit our weakness to the Council, we blamed an unknown species. It was cowardice." David took a deep breath before responding. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because watching that medical crew die to save people they never met made me realize something. Humans respond to danger by protecting others. My people respond by finding scapegoats. I do not know which impulse is natural and which is learned, but I know which one I respect more." The Hertian delegate joined them. "My people owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid." Those colonists saved by the Good Samaritan went on to establish 3 successful settlements. They have children and grandchildren now, over 1,000 descendants who would never have existed without human sacrifice. Yet we hid this from the Council because acknowledging it was politically inconvenient. "You're acknowledging it now," David said quietly. "That takes courage, too." "Courage found too late," the Hertian replied with sadness. Oryx called the Council back to order. The massive crystalline being seemed to glow brighter than before, as if the revelations had energized it somehow. David returned to his seat, wondering what would happen next. The evidence clearly favored humanity now, but he had learned not to assume anything about Council decisions. This council has examined the evidence presented, Oryx began. The witness stone has revealed truths that were hidden, both deliberately and through accident of history. We now understand that humanity was prejudged based on incomplete information and outright falsehoods. The High Arbiter paused, letting that statement settle over the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. However, Oryx continued, this council must consider more than just clearing humans of false charges. We must understand what the pattern revealed by the stone means for the galaxy. The Arbiter touched the witness stone once more. The projection appeared again, but this time it did not show any specific incident. Instead, it displayed text in a language David did not recognize. But a translation appeared below in human script. These are the original instructions left by the Forerunners when they created the Witness Stone, Oryx explained. Instructions that have guided the Council for 10,000 years. I will read the relevant passage. The Arbiter's mental voice took on a formal quality as it recited the ancient text. When you judge a species for inclusion in the greater community, examine not their strength or their knowledge, but their character in crisis. Some species preserve themselves above all. Some species conquer and dominate. But rare are the species who instinctively shield the vulnerable, even at cost to themselves. These are the guardians. They are precious beyond measure, for they will stand between the innocent and the darkness when all others flee. The chamber fell silent as the meaning became clear. David felt his heart pounding. The Forerunners, whoever they had been, had created the Witness Stone specifically to identify species like this. Species like humanity. In 10,000 years, Oryx said slowly, only twice before has the Council identified a species that matches the Forerunner description. The Velrani, who now serve as peacekeepers in the frontier regions. And the ancient Turdan, who went extinct 5,000 years ago, defending younger species from an extragalactic threat? The High Arbiter turned its crystalline gaze directly on David. David Reeves. The evidence shows that humanity is the third species in recorded history to display the characteristics the Forerunners called guardian nature. Your people consistently choose to protect others regardless of personal cost. This is not a trained behavior or a cultural choice. The pattern is too consistent, appears too early in your development. It is fundamental to who humans are. David could barely breathe. He had come here hoping just to prove humanity was not dangerous. Now, the Council was suggesting something far greater. The question before this Council is not whether humanity deserves membership, Oryx continued. That is now obvious. The question is whether humanity will accept the responsibilities that come with guardian status. What responsibilities? David managed to ask. The Forerunners established an organization called the Guardian Corps. Its purpose is to protect developing species, to respond to threats against the innocent, to stand watch in dangerous regions where others cannot or will not go. The Velrani have served in this capacity for 6,000 years. They are stretched thin across the galaxy, unable to be everywhere they are needed. Oryx gestured, and the projection changed to show a star map with highlighted regions. These are zones where the Guardian Corps currently operates. Pirates, slavers, Ravager remnants, and other threats operate in these areas. Developing species need protection. The Velrani do what they can, but they need help. The High Arbiter looked at David with what might have been hope. Humanity has already been doing this work unofficially, as the stone has shown. We ask now if you will do it officially, as part of the ancient covenant the Forerunners established. David stood slowly, his mind racing. The weight of what Oryx had just asked settled over him like a physical burden. The High Arbiter was not just offering humanity membership in the Council. They were offering a role that carried immense responsibility and danger. Lives would depend on human actions. Entire civilizations might rise or fall based on whether humans succeeded or failed as guardians. I need to understand what you're asking, David said carefully. The Guardian Corps protects others, but what does that mean in practical terms? A new delegate rose, one David had not heard speak before. This being was tall and lean, with golden skin that seemed to emit soft light. I am Sentinel Kariva of the Velrani. Perhaps I can explain what service in the Guardian Corps means. Kariva moved to stand beside Oryx. For 6,000 years, my people have answered distress calls from species who cannot defend themselves. We patrol regions too dangerous for normal commerce. We investigate disappearances. We stand between predators and their prey. We train local forces to defend their own worlds. We evacuate populations from natural disasters. We mediate conflicts before they become wars. We hunt pirates, slavers, and murderers across the stars. The Velrani paused, its luminous eyes meeting David's. We also die, frequently, last year alone. 147 Velrani gave their lives in service to the Corps. We are warriors. Yes, but also teachers, rescuers, and sometimes simply witnesses who ensure the vulnerable are not forgotten. The work is endless. The danger is constant. The rewards are rarely tangible. Then why do you do it? David asked. Because someone must, Kariva replied simply. Because the alternative is to let the weak suffer while the strong ignore their cries. My people cannot accept that alternative. From what the witness stone has shown, neither can yours. David thought of the Good Samaritan crew. 17 people who chose death over abandoning strangers. He thought of the soldiers defending miners they did not know, the transport crew shielding disabled ships with their own bodies, the pilot crashing into an asteroid to save an unnamed moon. Kariva was right. Humanity could not ignore suffering when they had the power to stop it. I cannot make this decision alone, David said. I need to consult with Earth's government. We understand, Oryx replied. However, the Council requires an answer within one standard cycle. The need is urgent. Ravager activity has increased in the frontier regions. Several developing species face threats they cannot handle alone. If humanity joins the Guardian Corps, you can begin making a difference immediately. The Hertian delegate approached David again. I know my words carry little weight after my people's deception, but I must speak. The descendants of those colonists saved by the Good Samaritan deserve to know humanity has been honored for that sacrifice. They have wanted to thank your species for 3 decades. Perhaps if humanity accepts this role, some of them would volunteer to serve alongside human guardians. We could begin to repay our debt. My people as well, the Corvithi delegate added. We have fine engineers and tactical specialists. If humans will stand in dangerous places, Corvithi can ensure their equipment and ships are the best available. David saw something remarkable happening. The species that had come to judge humanity were now offering to support them. The trial had transformed into something else entirely. I will contact Earth immediately, David said. May I transmit these proceedings? Yes, Oryx agreed. Let your people see what the stone revealed. Let them understand what is being asked of them. David spent the next several hours in a communications room, sending compressed data back to Earth and speaking with government officials in real time despite the lag. He watched their faces as they viewed the witness stone's projections, saw their tears when Alex Ward died saving Hertian children, saw their pride at the pattern of human behavior the stone revealed, saw their fear at the responsibility being offered. The debates on Earth lasted into the night. David tried to sleep but could not. He kept thinking about the visor that had changed everything. A simple piece of equipment that preserved the memory of ultimate sacrifice. Alex Ward had died never knowing that this moment would come, never imagining that one medical officer's choice would determine humanity's future among the stars. When David returned to the judgment chamber the next day, he carried Earth's answer. The room was packed again, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Delegates watched him with respect now. Even Hope. David stood before the council and spoke clearly. Earth has reviewed everything the witness stone revealed. We have debated the responsibilities and dangers of Guardian service. Our answer is yes. Humanity will join the Guardian Corps. We will stand watch in dangerous places. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will honor the legacy of the Good Samaritan and all the others who gave their lives before the galaxy knew our names. The chamber erupted in a sound David had never heard before. It took him a moment to recognize it as applause, expressed in dozens of different forms by dozens of different species. The Velrani Sentinel Kariva approached and placed a hand on David's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. "Welcome, Brother Guardian," Kariva said. "We have waited a long time for your people to reach the stars. The work ahead will test you, but I believe humans will prove worthy of the role the Forerunners foresaw." Oryx raised its crystalline arms, calling for silence. "This council formally recognizes humanity as the third guardian species. David Reeves, you will establish Earth's delegation to the Guardian Corps' headquarters. Training will begin immediately. Ships and resources will be provided. The galaxy has much need of those willing to stand between the innocent and the darkness." The High Arbiter gestured to the technician who had brought Alex Ward's visor. "This artifact will be preserved in the Hall of Guardians, alongside the relics of other heroes who define what it means to protect the vulnerable. Let it remind all species that sometimes the smallest act of courage reveals the greatest truth." David looked at the damaged visor and felt tears threatening again. Alex Ward would be remembered now. All of them would be, not as nameless casualties of early space exploration, but as the humans who proved what their species truly was. As the council session ended, and delegates came forward to congratulate him, David thought about Earth and the volunteers who would soon join the Guardian Corps. They would face danger and sacrifice. Some would not return home, but they would know their service mattered, that they stood in a tradition stretching back to the ancient Forerunners who had first recognized that some species were born to protect others. Humanity had been judged, and the relic had exposed the truth. Not of threat or conquest, but of a species that could not turn away from those in need. In the end, that truth had changed everything.